Rick, well, man, where do you want to start? How do you want to start this?
I kind of wanted to I like want to talk about our journeys. I think that's helpful to me. Like, kind of like I was like, I want to know where Steven started from. I know a little bit, but I don't know all your story. And I'm like, people need to kind of where I started from too. So I don't know, kind of like your journey to grace, or I don't even know I hate labels, right? We all moved through different stages or whatever. Even saying Trinitarian, I feel like is not sufficient, even though that's probably where I would land. But what is your journey? Kind of like, where did you start and how did you get to where you are today, kind of, so to speak, in a nutshell? And you can pause and you can ask me the same thing, I guess, too. But yeah, that's what I
Okay.
thought. And then people could ask questions for clarification, maybe, I don't know, some big key non-movable at this time things that become like in your heart and your life. You're like, I'm not going to budge on that. Like that's like that conviction is so deep in me. There's not going to be any compromise on that, so to speak. Like, yeah, kind of those big pillars in your life that you feel like are core convictions from your story.
That sounds like a great idea. Well, I guess would you like me
Yeah,
to kick it off or
yeah.
okay? Well, you're my guest, but okay, I'll kick
Or
it off.
you can start. You don't have to go long. You can just say, you can pause and say, not your turn or whatever if you want to.
Okay. All right. So, my background as a young boy is Catholic. I went to Sunday school. Um, Graduated from Sunday school. I did the whole. I don't even remember the proper terminology now because it's been so long. From
CCD,
there, huh?
CCD, confirmation
Okay,
classes or whatever. You did that? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, yeah, that might be it. And then it was like the typical Catholic um, believer, I guess. Not a very good Catholic, I guess. Uh, we I professed to be a Catholic, but never really practiced anything to a T except for Easter and Christmas, and maybe something on New Year's, and that was the extent of it. And then when I reached the age of about, I want to say like 14, maybe 15 years old. By then, I had a TV in my room, and so of course, you don't sleep when you're a kid and you have a TV in your room. And what do? You like surf through channels, and I landed on, well, TBN, and I was scared pantless. My pants were scared off of me. I thought I was going to hell. I thought for sure that I had no hope, and so uh, that moment was the beginning of, I guess I could say, the beginning of my search for God, if you will. That's really where it kind of like started, or a highlighted moment where it's like, okay, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I need some answers. That's where it all started for me, Rick.
That's great. I had a funny TBN story that I'll interject here, and I'll start further back in a second. But I mean, I was raised in a Christian home, and so, but then when I went to college, I was Southern Baptist. I grew up Southern Baptist in my practice, and I went to a Southern Baptist college in Central Texas, in Brownwood, Texas, called Howard Payne University. Stingham Jackets. That was our thing. Yellow Jackets. There's our stinger. So I remember that my freshman year, we were in the dorm and we were watching on a tiny little TV. And this is a long time ago. And Benny Hinn was on TBN or whatever. And my friend and I, as good Southern Baptists do, we were making fun of him and laughing at him. And that semester, I was taking volleyball and I had hurt my knee in volleyball class. And Benny Hinn, we're making fun and everything. He starts praying. He used to pray for people. I don't know if everybody watched Benny Hinn back in the day, but he put your hands on the screen or whatever. He'd go like this, and he'd say, I see somebody right now who has a bad knee or hurt his knee or whatever. And I'm like, like freaking out, he's calling out a word of knowledge. Of course, there's millions of people watching. So, but it was just like a eye opener to me. And I'm like, wait a second. And then my buddy who was in the next door, he lived next door. He had Benny Hinn's Good Morning Holy Spirit book or whatever. As a good little Southern Baptist boy, I didn't even know those charismatics were going to heaven, And so he ended up being the president of the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas for a while. Anyway, interesting. So I had that kind of TBN moment or whatever when I'm mocking it, yet the Lord kind of spanks me. But yeah, I grew up in a Baptist Christian home. My dad was saved when I was little, and I remember when he got baptized, he slipped and fell. My dad was a bigger guy, and he slipped and fell. When the pastor was about 125 pounds, my dad was about 225 pounds, and he went to go dunk my dad, and the bottom of the baptistry was slippery, and I was like 5 years old. And I remember my mom said, my dad made a big splash or something. So that's but my dad got saved. My mom had a relationship, but never went to church. So they were raising me. I was the firstborn. They had never really gone to church in their life, and so, but that's where I grew up. Every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Remember Wednesday night church for some of you guys, Wednesday night supper. And so then when I was in probably 16, I felt called to the ministry. I was at a summer camp, and I felt like the pastor was teaching, and I was like, I want to do that one day. And so when you're 16, you think you're going to be a youth pastor. So, because that's how you're not going to be a pastor. So I just felt called to ministry. Come to my parents and said, I think I'm supposed to be a pastor. And years later, I mean, I'm an adult. This is like probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. My mom told me that she used to pray when I was little that I would be a pastor. She never told me that until I already was, because she didn't want to poison the well, so to speak. And so, yeah, so that began my journey. I was raised in a very good home, and then I was, Ricky, who's going to be a youth pastor and youth choir, and did all the stuff and went to church every so often. Every Sunday, Wednesday, we were there. And then I went off to a Baptist college. And yeah, so that's kind of where my wheels fell apart as far as questioning kind of religion and, what was real or whatever. Towards the end of my college days, I kind of got burned out with going to a Christian college. You'd have people that pretended like, they'd sleep in on Sunday morning and then get dressed in church clothes and go down to eat in the cafeteria so people wouldn't judge them, and I was just like, this is just stupid. So I was kind of done with performance-based religion. I came home and was still working on becoming a school teacher at the time, and not really going to church. My parents changed churches because the church I grew up in was so toxic and unhealthy. And so they're like, well, let's go to another church, thinking they would help me go to church. And I kind of was sporadically there or whatever. And then that's actually how I met Melissa. The youth pastor was starting back then, before postmodern was a thing. It was like a buzzword now, or not even now. I think it's probably already past all that. But back when guys like Brian McLaren and before Rob Bell even, and those guys were writing stuff, like this pastor started doing this postmodern type service, and he got me involved playing the guitar. And that's when I actually ended up meeting Melissa. We played on a worship team together, and we almost we hated each other because of Bandera, Texas, Stephen. We were spending the night at her boss's cabin with some friends of ours, and we just were bugging the heck out of it. We're bugging the hell out of each other. It was so funny. We came back from there and we're like, I don't even like you. And then a year later we were dating, and a year later we were married. So it was pretty funny.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. So anyway, I'll pause there. So
okay,
that gets me through that. So I kind of rediscovered the Lord, at least when Melissa and I met. And again, not kind of where I am now, but at least, like, if we're going to do this, I want to do this for real. And so we were very involved in our Southern Baptist church, got married there, everything, sang on the worship team, started having conversations. So New Kind of Christian by Brian McLaren. I don't know how familiar anybody is with that, but I mean, that's 25 years ago. It was groundbreaking. It was the stuff that we're talking about now, as far as just viewing the scriptures differently, viewing questions of eternity differently, all that kind of stuff. Like McLaren tackled that stuff 30 years ago, 25 years ago, probably almost 30 now. It seems like just yesterday. But it was such a refreshing look as a guy who had grown up in religious systems and was tired of behavior modification, like thinking God, if anything bad happened, that was God zapping you because you were sinning. Just, you know, all the stuff that a lot of us have purged ourselves of. His book was monumental. I mean, monumental. The guy I don't think is a believer anymore, but at the time it was huge. It was a huge book. But so yeah, so that's kind of started us down that path, and of at least being open to questioning dogmas of evangelicalism, not of faith. Anyway, so I'll pause there.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so I guess for me, from my whole TBN moment, that kind of led my family and I, because I brought it up with my family. I was so terrified of going to hell, as I was saying, and as I brought it up in conversation with my folks, that's when we started to, explore different churches. And so we went to one. Actually, we went to a church in our town that was somewhat TBN-ish already, like the way they did stuff. And we started out there, and then we went to a Baptist, like a, I don't know, I guess it's like a Bible Baptist church. I don't even know if that even makes any sense today or not, but
Yeah.
It was like, I went from like legalistic teachings to super legalistic teachings. And then I got kicked out of there because, well, one, I was asked by my peers to teach on behalf of the youth. I have no idea why. I had no desire to teach. I'm terrified of audiences, and absolutely zero background in putting anything together, like any kind of teaching together. I must have been probably by now, I probably was around 16, 17 years old at that time. Anyways, I taught, I forget what it was all about. It had something to do with Moses. Shortly after that, we got kicked out. So I must have said something, and I don't know what it was. So from there, we went to a non-denominational church.
So wait, your parents were cool with this? Like they're
All
like,
this was
hey,
oh yeah,
if Steven's interested, we're interested.
Yeah, they were very supportive about us exploring this whole thing. All right, let's get some answers. I think they just saw that I was genuinely scared.
Yeah.
And my mom being very very much Catholic, she I don't think that she had ever lost any value for the values of God, in the
Yeah.
sense of knowing, believing in something, in someone. Yeah, so from there we went to a non-denominational church, a little more charismatic, not quite Pentecostal by any stretch of the imagination, but flags, lights and stuff that I hadn't really like seen. That's when I started to hear about signs and wonders, and miracles and healings and all this stuff that was it was interesting, but incredibly foreign to me. I didn't really know if it really happened. I did see Benny Hinn a couple times, so I kind of like had an idea, like, oh well, okay, stuff must happen, but maybe only for people that wear like really nice clothes and have jets. And then that led, so from the non-denominational church, that led me to go to that's what kind of paved the way to go to Bethel in,
Yeah.
in Reading. Went to Reading.
What years were you in Reading?
That was 2007 and 8.
Okay. So I'm trying. That's when we were cutting our teeth there too. Do we talk about this already? Have we talked about people we know?
Uh, no, I don't think so.
Jason Tax, do you know Jason by any chance? Or Paul Rapley? Or
Paul
Jason
sounds
Chen?
Jason Chen, yeah, I know him.
Anyway,
For
okay,
him.
go ahead.
Um, yeah. From and Bethel was like that's where this more of a grace teaching, that's kind of where I the journey of that sort of started. It really kind of started to take root a little bit. And by then, obviously, by the time I decided to go to the school, by then I had developed a desire to be in ministry.
Yeah.
I had these like great ideas in my head about traveling and, well, a lot like what you were mentioning, right? Like traveling and preaching and teaching, just go and love on people in that way. Just was a fantasy in my head that I just thought that's for me. That's what I want to do. Um,
Did you do 2 years, 3 years?
I actually only did 1 year.
Okay.
So from the 1 year, the in 2006, late 2006 or so, Aubrey and I we were getting to know each other. We were friends. I thought she was incredibly annoying when I first met her. She had this crazy laugh. I don't know what happened. She had this weird, crazy laugh. It almost sounded like a donkey. They had this like thing, and I was like, oh no, no, this girl is crazy. I do not want to be with her. Didn't want anything to do with her. And sure enough, eventually I saw that I was missing out on a lot with her. And shortly after I had found out that I was going to go to Bethel, I mean like 2 weeks, I asked Aubrey if she wanted to be my girlfriend, and then I dropped the news on her that I was leaving Bethel. She
Hey, I'm
still said
leaving.
yes. Yeah,
Oh,
she still said yes. And we had a long distance relationship while I was at Bethel the entire time.
wow.
And by the end of the year, I couldn't take it anymore, and so I had to come back home, be
Yeah.
with her, and I we ended up proposing, and then eventually we got married. But I had these like beautiful, ideas in my head about ministry, and when I got back, I saw some of the ugly side of church stuff
Yeah.
that just honestly it just broke me. I mean, it shattered me to pieces, and I didn't want anything to do with ministry after that.
Yeah.
So that was around 2010, and in 2019, late 19, um, by one way or another, I think Aubrey was starting to listen to some of our old teachers, people that we had listened to in the past. And you know what happened? I ended up wondering. I was like, oh, I wonder what John Crowder is up to. So I remember listening to him on YouTube when he first had the Jesus Trip, and I pulled him up, and then eventually I found out about Cana New Wine Seminary, and so that's when I did that, the Cana Seminary, and from there it was just blazing glory of just nonstop reading, doing the school, going through the school. I mean, it was just crazy for me. And
That's
then,
interesting
yeah,
that Bethel is. I wonder how many people here that's their common, like a little step on their journey is Bethel. I mean, Bethel was super influential in our lives as well. So I don't know, probably several of you, people listening, would say the same thing. Possibly, I know a lot of people. It's kind of the gateway drug.
so yeah, that's in my story of falling into this grace thing. That's it in a very. I mean, there's obviously a lot more details
Yeah.
that's happened in and out of through that, but yeah.
So similar. So I where was I? So my wife and I, we met at the Second Baptist Church. Like I said, Melissa and I got married, started having babies immediately, uh, moved to Texas. I mean, to Plano, which is where she grew up. And then God, kind of through some circumstances, I lost my job and things happened. And we moved to California and we're basically homeless for a few weeks and then, or a few months. And then got a job and I started a little Southern Baptist church. The pastor there, my friend who I'd met when Melissa and I were doing the postmodern worship service. He ended up being he and his wife were the ones that went with us to Bandera when we all traveled up there together. And they're the ones that Melissa and I almost didn't get married because they kept trying to push us together. They wouldn't leave us alone just to kind of find our own way. So he was the drummer, and when on our worship team there in Corpus Christi, when we were doing, and Melissa was a singer, and he and I would get in trouble, and I'm playing the guitar and singing. Anyway, so he had gone to California, and he was youth pastor or associate pastor at a church, youth pastor, kind of just number two. And so we went out there and lived with them. And the guy that was pastoring the church had been healed of cancer. He grew up as Southern Baptist or got saved as Southern Baptist, and when he was in Texas, he had got healed at some little prayer meeting in somebody's garage. Somebody just said, God, I've always had good health. Give my health to Terry. And Terry, his name, just got completely healed and didn't even believe in healing, didn't know anything about it. So Terry was still a Southern Baptist, a good old Southern Baptist, but he was going everywhere, every meeting, anything he could get his hands on that was anything charismatic or Pentecostal or spirit filled. So he was the pastor of this little church in Port Hueneme, California, when we showed up. And he left shortly thereafter, but he kind of mentored me at the beginning, and the Lord used him in my life to teach me some humility, and not that I hadn't already learned some, but just lots of things. And so through that, they both kind of recognized this gifting in my life, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I was called to ministry when I was in high school, and I have some experience. I've done things. It's not like, but they didn't know all that. So Terry left and Ron became the pastor. So then I became his associate. And then after about a year, Ron had wanted to be a chaplain in the military and he didn't have the experience. And out of the blue, somebody, this recruiter calls him and says, "You still interested?" And Ron's like, "Well, kind of, not really. I don't want to go through the paperwork again. And, it's a long application you got to fill out." And he gained weight and all this kind of stuff. And the guy's like, "Well, if you get that application to me, I can look into it." And so we had a chaplain in our church that worked at the Navy base, and he took the little floppy disk and he got a guy to crack the encryption. So Ron's application was there. So all he had to do was update it. He lost all this weight. He had an ankle that got healed, all this kind of journey that to take him basically out of pastoring. And then I took over. So I didn't know anything about how to pastor. I was a school teacher. I had started going to seminary, but they don't teach you anything about leading a church at that time, besides just theology and stuff. I went to King's Seminary. Jack Hayford was like a mentor. And again, I didn't know anything charismatic stuff. Like my friend Ron and I were Southern Baptist boys. We had no idea. He had encountered the Holy Spirit in some backwoods meetings, and so we were just going down this journey together. We'd go to the charismatic section of the Christian bookstore, and it was like this big on the shelf, and it had stuff like Pigs in the Parlor and Derek Prince stuff and all this like deliverance weird stuff, nothing like we have today. And so along that journey, before he leaves, he gets this book called When Heaven Invades Earth. And he and I start reading it. Before he leaves, he goes up to Bethel and has a with one of our guys. I didn't get to go, and has this encounter. So then off he goes, and I'm like stranded there by myself, thinking, okay, we can do this, let's do this. And so Bethel became that Bill Johnson, when Heaven Invades Earth. I just, I was already open because Melissa had gotten healed. I think she talked about that probably when she was here with you guys. So, but we had just no discipleship, for lack of a churchy word. We had no grid for anything. We were just trusting God. I mean, like we were trying to cast demons out of people. We didn't know what we were doing. So a guy was actually mentally ill, and we're trying to, anyway, he might have had a demon too, but whatever. We just had no idea. He had a head injury or something. Like we were just doing where we were worshiping, and God was showing up. We had no grid. So we're just like, I just needed mentoring. I need help. So when Heaven Invades Earth, I read this, and it coincides with Melissa's, getting healed, and I'm like, God really does heal today. I can't believe this. I felt lied to and tricked all those years as a good little Southern Baptist boy. I'm like, there's all this stuff happening, and so I'm going to a Pentecostal seminary, and I'm talking about the stuff that's happening at our church. After I took over, stuff started happening. I'll tell you that in a second. And people who were Foursquare or Assemblies of God, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, wait a second, you guys have had this the whole time. How come you guys haven't been seeing that? And then I began to realize that what was going on at Bethel was something unique and different, And so Bill was my father from afar. He was a mentor from afar, just everything. We would go up there for leaders advances. We would just, whenever we could, we tried to be, of course, mimicry is the sincerest form of flattery, so we tried to copy everything they were doing, which is not something I recommend. But when you don't know what you're doing, it works for a little while. So that, like in that time period, we just saw so much happen. I mean, I'm in seminary, and I online class, and a guy, Paul Rapley, and he says he's in Redding, California. And I'm like, hey, you heard of Bethel? He goes, look, I'm in school of ministry too. I'm like, hey, why don't you come down? Are you coming down for this class? Because we have to do so. Back then, accreditation for master's degrees for seminaries, you had to actually have some on-ground class. Now I think most schools accreditation allow you to go fully remote. So he had to come down for a class. I'm like, why don't you stay with us? We can just drive down to Van Nuys together, and you can stay with us. And so he says, sure. He goes, do you want us to do anything? It's Easter Sunday, mind you, Easter Sunday, right? The big high holy day when all the people are coming from all the visitors. And I'm like, sure. So he brings his buddy, my friend Jason Tax, and they come down Easter Sunday. That's how stupid I was. Or I'm like, turn the service over to them, and like they're laying on the platform laughing, and we ended up having like every corner of our little tiny church had healing going on. Backs were over here, knees were over there, cancers over here, whatever. Like it was just like pandemonium, and it was crazy. I look back now and going, that's not a real seeker sensitive way to handle a Sunday morning, Easter Sunday morning. I'm sure people were freaked out. People left the church, of course, that were religious.
No.
Yeah, it was crazy. So that kind of started this journey, man. We just saw literally over the course of our entire 10 or 12, 11 years there, we probably saw 10 or 15 people healed of cancer, pre-cancer stuff. One time in 1 year, we had 6 people. Had like one of our elders, she was on the table getting a biopsy of her mom died of breast cancer. She has a lump. They're going in to biopsy it. There's a lump there. They stick the needle in. They pull it out. They go to feel the lump. They can't feel it. It's completely gone. I mean, stuff like we did a 24/7 prayer room, and a lady got healed of cancer in there, or precancerous stuff. I mean, it was like insane, right? Insane. So we're drinking the Bethel Kool-Aid, and it was good. It was great. It's so influential. I really credit them with a lot. But then, there was that, well, yeah, there was that shift. I don't know how many guys were around or how deep you were into it. I started reading John, Ecstasy of Loving God, started watching some of his YouTube stuff. I mean, the first place I ever heard that your old man is dead, the sin nature is dead, is at Bethel Church. I heard Dan McCollum and Chris Valentin. Chris Valentin preached a sermon about living on the right side of the cross, that we're no longer the old, that we've been transferred to the new. And I'm like, you're no longer a sinner. I mean, like that was at Bethel Church, which today probably would be controversial. But anyway, Dan McCollum preaching that strong. I mean, Chris Valentin preaching that your house is haunted. That was his. Dan McCollum was the right side of the cross. I still remember hearing those sermons, and this is before I even heard John, and it just resonated in me. This Romans 6 reality that the old sin nature is dead. That this is before Mystical Union, John's book. This is before any of that. I heard those two messages completely rocked my world and changed the way I thought about myself, changed the way that I approached things, changed the way I looked at God. You know, Bethel always talks about God being good, the goodness of God. That was huge, of course, but that reality introduced me to grace and kind of started me on this journey. And it just all of a sudden it just made so much sense. I don't know if that same thing when you first heard it. It was like, how did I miss this? How did I miss that the old man's dead? You know,
Yeah.
was that something similar to you?
Um, no, well, in 2007, 8, that message was being taught there when I was there.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that a lot. And not just from the main guys at Bethel, but also a lot of their guest speakers. Now, but so at that moment, the most I had ever heard about John was his book, The New Mystics.
Yeah.
I hadn't read it.
Yeah.
That's all. I honestly didn't start listening to John until after I'd come back to Texas. And I have to say, like, there was a moment in my life back then when I truly believed that, and then I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't. I was Rick. I was so angry with the church. It was. It would have been. It was ugly. Most of my friends and I mean, I would say some of my family members too would tell you that it was just not good. My thought about church, and so I'm trying to think here because I don't want to go. I don't want to sidetrack. Whenever, let's see, it wasn't until I started. It wasn't until I bought a book. This was before Cana. I bought John's Mystical Union book, audio,
Yeah.
audio. And at the time, I was still pressure washing, and I was pressure washing then, and I was also delivering pizzas. And so every moment, and it's so funny because in part of his book, he's got that, about delivering pizzas in that book. Um, any chance that I would get, I'd hit play, and as I'm on the road to go deliver a pizza, I'd hear a little chapter or part of a chapter, and then I just pick it up, in and out, boom, 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 over and over and over. I'd listened to that book probably 4 or 5 times in the truck, as I'm delivering pizzas. And then it hit. And then it's like, oh, I get what he's saying. I think I get it. And that's whenever it was through Cana that Romans 6, of the sin nature and all that stuff being done away with, really, really hit home. Really hit home. And then so ever since then, it's just been this, as we're calling it, a journey of relationship and understanding how God just is interwoven into our lives, not by our doing, but by His doing, and how He's, in a sense, romancing us back to this understanding of His union with us and with the Father. So, yeah, I'd say that for me, that it didn't really hit until right around Cana. So it would have been in late 2019 for me.
That's great. Well, sadly, going back to the church hurt, all of us have been hurt by the church. I still don't like the church. I mean, I do love the church. I just don't like it. You know, I
Yeah.
serve in it and I love the people and I love where I'm at, but it's just what it is devolved into. And it's so easy and rightfully so. It's so hurtful and so wounding. I mean, fast forwarding, I'll fill in the gaps a little bit, but I mean, like when we moved from Port Hueneme to Portland, I was done, man. I was done with church. You know, I'm like, here's 12 years of my life that I poured out. I was telling Stephen before, you know, my wife and I retirement plan now, you know, if we have one, you know, 10 years of being the senior pastor, 12 years of the church, and I left owing the IRS money because the church didn't pay my part of my taxes or whatever, even though my bookkeeper said she was withholding them because we couldn't pay bills sometimes. And, you know, 3 months without getting paid one time and living, fortunately, we had a parsonage. Just funny story one time, like when I first took over, when it was still good, you know, whenever I was like, I could weather anything. And then you kind of get beat down a little bit through the church. But I was in the back, we had a little baptistry, and behind the baptistry was a couple of closets where you could change into your clothes to get baptized. Well, I would go back there before service and sit in one of those closets and pray before the service started. And this lady in our church who predated me dragged one of our elders at the time back in there and was talking shit about me. Part of my language, if that offends anybody, saying, "Well, if Chuck goes and starts a church, I'm going to go with him." Chuck was my associate pastor, and I'm like in the closet hearing her badmouth me and make plans, plotting, and so I stick my head out the door and I go, "Hey," and I
This is
go,
awkward.
"Hey," yeah, I said, "Can you step out for a second, Wanda?" And I said, "Mike, can I talk to you?" That was my elder Mike, and I'm like, "What in the heck, man? What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm so sorry." He's a very non-confrontational guy, you know. He's like, "I just didn't know how to stop her. I didn't know what to say or whatever." So just stories like that, from those kind of stories to having, you know, like I said, having to not get paid for 3 months, getting my pay cut multiple times, and being on food stamp for, you know, 2 or 3 of the years of the 10 years we were pastoring, people stabbing you in the back and hurting you, and you know, it's people gossiping about you. It was hard, man. I totally get the church hurt and the wounding that can happen, and especially when you were just, you just wanted to serve, right? All you wanted to do was just be a blessing, and you wanted to see God's kingdom come. You know, you just were trying to help and follow what you feel God had called you to do, and you feel like you just get kicked, and it's 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 really rough. But you know, as imperfect as it is, we got to figure out, man, how to, like this is church. We're having church right now. Not an excuse not to gather with people, not an excuse to surround yourself with and put yourself in an echo chamber when all you hear is exactly everybody else. Like, you know, it's good to be challenged. It's good to, you know, have different personalities and relationships rub you, iron sharpening iron. You know, you don't have to agree about everything. That's good. It's healthy, but it's toxic when people are, uh, yeah, just constant wounding you, you know, or seeking to wound you and not working on their own stuff. And so I was done. 12 years, I was done. So we'd done Cana in person year 2. And I'm skipping over some of the stories. So that's where we were in whatever that 2017, 28, whatever that was, 2016, 2015. And John had come down. So let me back up. So we're on the Bethel train. We're riding the Bethel train hard. I was saying we're seeing stuff happen. I like myself because I'm like, you know, this is fun, you know. The church is growing and then dropping and growing and dropping, you know. So you're dealing with all that. And then I had like a breakdown, and when I was about 40 years old, 40 something years, like around my 40th birthday. And probably some of you who are older can identify with this. There's like that, they call it midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it, but somewhere between 40 and 50, you just either deal with your stuff or you just become an unhealthy person, I think. And I think at that point in my life, there was a guy, my dad had died of cancer. It's another side story. And so I was always hungry for kind of a father figure. And in that Bethel culture too, what they teach you about spiritual fathers and coverings, huge, right? That's why I didn't listen to John for a while. I was scared of him because he didn't have a covering, he didn't have a spiritual father. So Bethel was real big about that, which I get, I understand, but at the same time, it can create some unhealthy expectations in other people. So this guy was in my life, and he was really kind of negative, and I am a positive person, and that I found out later that affects me. So I kind of had a snap, kind of broke, and I didn't even realize it. My wife's like, "You're not you. There's something wrong with you. You need to go see a counselor, or we're in trouble." So I went to go see a guy, and he just, I mean, he wasn't even, he was a lay counselor, older than dirt, loved him to death, and he would just talk to me, and he would just say, "Let's pray and ask Jesus." It was very sozo without being weird sozo. It was very healthy and very just connecting me. And again, I'm just knowing the gospel, and I'm not anti-counseling or anti-anything at this point. Even now, today, it's good to have spiritual direction more than anything. But it was just very monumental. So then I began building back, and then listening to John. I'm reading Ecstasies of Loving God. That's the first book I got of his that used to be sold in the Bethel bookstore, or the New Mystics before that, or whatever. I remember toking the ghost in my bed, and just I was like, this is crazy. And just, and back then, Bethel was all about getting drunk. So it was no big deal. They were seamless to me. But then, I don't know, about 2012, 13, messages started coming out there. They were kind of bashing the grace message and making accusations. And I was at a dinner one time, and one of the big dudes, I won't even name names because this might be on YouTube. We were at Bethel at the Leaders Advance, and having Melissa was close to his wife, and we were having, like one of the big three, and we were having dinner, and he's sitting there popping off about how these grace guys don't know how to pastor people, and they don't know people, and just like making total assumptions, putting his foot in his mouth, just being an a-hole, and it just hurt. It hurt to hear messages from there, even from Bill himself, that sounded like, to me, even though I was probably wrong, that he was pointing out somebody that I was close to, that I had fed from. I understand that's not the case. That's what it sounded like to me. I mean, Bill has been nothing but amazing to John and his family through everything, and that John and Lily have gone through or whatever. So I'm not in any way. And John says, "No, he's not talking about me." And I'm like, man, it sounds like he's talking about you. But I hate. I'm not trying to. I'm just telling you, it's my journey. It's what I was taking. Whether he was or not is not the case. Is not the point. The point is, I took it that way, and it began to. And I was getting burned out with I'm all for the presence of God, but like that culture, you lived it for a year, Stephen, and we were up there a lot and had friends. It's just like, it can be very draining and drift really easily, not because of necessarily them, but the culture that creates around them, to just very performance oriented and very, works motivated. Did I see some amazing stuff? Man, yes. Did I love being able to walk into a CVS or a Big Lots or a McDonald's and feel like I had words for people? And I still like doing that, but I felt it became performative and tied to my identity in an unhealthy way. And so then when I started embracing grace, I was just like, oh, wait a second, I can do all that without it meaning that I'm good or bad, or that I'm accepted or not accepted or whatever. Like, it wasn't some kind of little check on my spiritual scorecard of Rick's a revivalist, Rick's a bringer of the kingdom or whatever terminology. And so it was super freeing. And I don't know, again, this is my experience. I'm not talking, I learned a lot. I mean, one of my core values that I developed in my time under Bethel's influence, it's impossible to pray and nothing happened, right? We pray and something happens, that God is good, better than they even think. I found out later, he's not roasting people in hell for all of eternity. That God is good, that it's impossible to pray and nothing happen, that he's right here, the value of worship, the imminent presence of God that I don't have to strive for, that he's closer than the air I breathe, he's nearer than my skin. I mean, all that was shaped in that time, and it still shapes who I am today. But yeah, so we had John down to Port Hueneme, and he'd done a meeting, and I was shocked, honestly, that people were upset at it. The people in my church who are real big into deliverance ministry didn't like his messages. I don't know why. They heard him, because he poo-poos, like the old school deliverance stuff, and I didn't like it either, but it was just funny, and so that kind of solidified in just the new mystics, then mystical union, and just really began to just preach that message and let that message become part of me, and it led to the beginning of the end, I guess, with our church there. In a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a good way.
So, Rick, let me ask you something, because you have so much experience in ministry, and I think there's people here that are just like stepping into ministry now, or they're wanting to move towards it, or there's like, I'm sure there's people in different stages like actually working in what you would call, what we think of when we say the word ministry, like traditional ministry titles. What would be like your number one advice to them, to the ones that are starting out? What's your heart, for them and the church, and does that make any sense? Like, what
Yeah,
is it?
no, that's a great question. I can't ever answer that question shortly. So I had to always start like philosophical or why, and move my way kind of to the what and the how.
Please do, because I mean, I'm not in a hurry, but if you are, I understand. But
no, I'm good.
okay.
So first of all, I do think, okay, how many? What is Jordan Peterson made popular, the Pareto distribution? Where there's people who have a whole bunch and people who have a little. That's just going to be how life is, just not because of IQ and blah blah blah. It's a classic bell curve. Just think bell curve. And so I felt like Simon Sinek. There was a guy named Simon Sinek. He was a business dude, and he talked about early adopters versus late adopters when it comes to technology. So I have these AirPods here. So there's, there's, back in the day, I had a laser disc player. Before CDs, the laser discs, they were as big as a record, but they were laser discs, So I had one of those, but I wanted one way before. I always wanted to be an early adopter. So flat screen TVs when they first came out. So like the population percentage who are early adopters is very, very small. And then as the bell curve rises and technology becomes it's cheaper and more widely available, more and more people adopt it. Think of cell phones, right? Some of you maybe were first iPhone people, but most of us were flip phones or brick or Nokias or whatever. Some of you still have that. So then the mass majority of people are in the middle of the road. And then there's late adopters, the people still with flip phones today, or the people, they're not Luddites, they're not like anti-technology. They're just like, I'm old, I don't want to learn anything new, blah, 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 yada, yada. So I felt, and I know I'm going somewhere with this does make sense. I feel like that's the same thing with the church. I feel like the church, where the church is going, the evangelical church as we know it, and I even hate to use that term, but that's we're all part of that. Most of us here came from that kind of culture. It's dying. And there's people on the ship that will never see what the new church will be. And there are people, because they'll be physically dead, they'll see it from heaven. And there's those of us maybe that will be early adopters and have some say. And there's hopefully the people that are younger than us that will come up and take it where it's going to go next. And so I think first of all, it's kind of figuring out where you are. Like most people here are probably kind of early adopt. If they have an interest in ministry today, you would have to be some kind of early adopter to what God is doing next, because you wouldn't be sitting here on calls like this if you were comfortable with the status quo and happy with the way things look in church today. And I'm not saying it's all negative, but it's not super healthy what we've turned church into today. And I'm not, but guess what? It is what we have. So first of all, I got to start there. So I felt like when I was done with church, right? I was done with church as we know it. If I was going to do something, it was going to be something early adopter. But here I am in a church that's been here for 50 years, and it's filled with older folks who will never see what happens in the next 20 years. The most of them will be dead the next 20 years, the large majority of my congregation that I'm serving in. And so how do I pastor in that kind of context and environment at the same time knowing that this is not where I'm the most comfortable? And so that leads to the why and the how, or the how and the what, and the what and the how. So I think if you're called to ministry and that kind of thing, you have to be willing to serve a people that may not quite get it 100%, and be okay with that. Like, if you feel called to the church and called to ministry, you can go hang your own shingle. You can go, like that's at Bethel. I did some career fair things where we try to get interns. Nobody wanted to come to the local church. Everybody wanted to go be the next Heidi Baker or the next whomever or the next evangelist. They all wanted to travel and do ministry and have the crowds or whatever, but nobody wanted to do local church. If you're called to a local church, you're going to have to realize God may call you to some place where they're not going to have it all right. And you have to, like, again, I learned at Bethel, culture of honor. You have to learn to honor people where they're at. So that's what I felt like when God called me back. I didn't think I would ever be back in a church. Like I said, I didn't think I could serve in one. I didn't think I could sit in one and listen to bad theology or bad worship music or whatever. I just didn't think I had that capability in me. And yet here's God saying, Rick, this is where I have you. And I felt called to my senior pastor. Now, we agree on several things, and he doesn't teach penal substitution atonement and some other stuff, core value stuff to me about God, but we also are really, really different. But I felt like the Lord said, you have all this experience, you have all this education, you have all this knowledge, and you need to go do this. And so even though the ship is sinking, I'm on that ship. And I think if you're going to be in ministry in a traditional kind of feeling called to that might be where you have to be for a while. That may be where you need to serve, knowing that the ship is sinking, but knowing that, guess what? The 85-year-old guy or the 92-year-old guy today who came up to me at church and wanted me to help him use the church app and make sure it was on his phone, who's 92, and he still wants to make sure he can use the church app. Jim Cole, he needs somebody to pastor and love him for the next few years of his life. And he may never hear of apostasis or total or ultimate reconciliation, he may never know some of these terms or know the fullness of Trinitarian theology or whatever, but Jim needs somebody to show him how to use the app and love him and learn what he has to give. And so I think you have to really remember where, like, if you're called to the church as the traditional church, if you will, you're called to a place that is dying, and you have to be there to serve other people. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I'm not saying that there aren't people who are called to just, marketplace stuff or go hang their shingle and do other things. I'm just saying, if there are people that feel like I'm called to ministry, but I don't fit in the church or whatever, maybe there is a church where you do fit in, and you can go low, you can still be yourself, and it's not about you. I'm there to serve Greg, my senior pastor. That's my goal, and serve the people secondary. But I'm serving him. I want to pastor. I want to be his number two, so that he can lead the church the way that God has called him to lead the church. And whether we agree and sync on everything or read all the same things or not, it doesn't really make a difference. So I think you have to be comfortable doing that if you feel called to the local church. Now, you can go start something too. That's kind of fun and interesting. But even then, you're going to have to serve people and honor I use Bethel's core values, all their things that they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Wow. No, that's really good advice. I think it's really easy, just to get lost in everything that you're learning, and kind of like adopt this attitude of just forget everybody else. Fine, you don't agree with me, rah.
No, it is. And
yeah.
okay, can I talk about you do have to, if you're going to do this though, it's lonely, and you need to have yourself surround yourself with gospel people, grace people, whatever. What's a term? I don't even know. But people who are in the message, who support you and breathe life into you. If you don't have those people, then you need to be listening to John and Malcolm and Baxter and reading their stuff or whatever. But it's really helpful to have, or coming something like have community on Zoom even, because it is lonely. Even though I love and get along with my senior pastor, we agree a lot. There's times where I hold back. He doesn't know everything. I think I just don't want to fight, and I don't want to argue, and I'm at a place where it doesn't really matter to me. I don't care what he believes, but I feel like he would care what I believe on certain topics. So it's still, you're going to run into that, and you've got to have people that you feel safe, even if they don't agree with you, but feel safe with they sharing that. So I'll come home and I'll tell Melissa, I'm just like, man, I just feel lonely today, because I'm just, where are the people who can encourage me and remind me, hey, that old sin nature's dead, and you're okay, and you're going to be good, and it's not, whatever it is, So you gotta have that support system for yourself as well.
There's nothing better than, after having like a really rough day and you come home and somebody puts like your favorite bowl of stew in front of you
Right.
and to say everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to have a spouse that gets it, so we can process that. And
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to have, friends that are close and that are in the message. And, John's one of my best friends. And that's a huge blessing. And so get to have that influence in my life, get to have other friends that check up on me and vice versa. So yeah, church is weird right now. That's all I'm going to say. Church is weird.
Yeah. No, that was great, Rick. I appreciate, the wisdom and, your conversational angle with all of this, because it's sometimes, when we get into these like real meaty revelation or revelatory type stuff, I mean, it's all great, but what does that look like in life? What does that look like in relationship?
Yeah.
What does that look like to a mother, and or single dad, or so on? What does it look like for someone that's working 60 hours a week, and
Yeah.
and I think having conversations like this is really helpful. It's a very home conversation, and it's people need to know that it's this is it. This is what life looks like, amongst
That's,
friends that are gathering together, if you will, around this bread, if you will.
I think, I'll shut up after this, but I think that's so true, Stephen, because everybody, okay, if they're logging on to this, the chances are they're self-feeders. You know what I mean? They're listening to people, they're reading books, they're having conversation or whatever. They're growing in this message. Maybe there's people that are kicking the tires, but to take out time on a Sunday evening to get on a Zoom, there's something there that they're hungry, and people are they're studying and learning stuff. So yes, I could do that, like you said, but I think that's why I wanted to hear your story. I want to hear what Josh is saying about how it affects his life. Like, that helps me see how this message is supposed to maybe impact me, like allowing it to infiltrate my being and live my life differently and live my, yeah. So I just value this. I like hearing people's story. I think story is the most powerful thing we have anyway. That's how we got here, is a story, like the Bible. The story of Jesus is a story that starts in the garden and goes until the end. And It's a story that sustains us, and it's a story that we have to, So hearing that story in other people's lives, I think, is for me beneficial. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
No worries, man. No, that's it.